Touhou LostWord is losing steam as it approaches its 1.5th anniversary. Players are complaining about recycled content, new character spam, and pay-to-win rarities. Hello everyone! Most of you know me as A. Johans. I've been making LostWord guides for about a year and have been playing since launch. Touhou gacha games are notorious for going out of service, or basically dying out, EOS. So today let's take a closer look at Touhou LostWord. The mobile/gacha game market is quite competitive, so what makes LostWord stand out? Well, apparently, just because it's Touhou. Touhou is a series with a large cast of quite well designed, unique, and almost entirely female characters. And everyone will have their favorites, and by playing this game, people feel as though they get a chance to interact with their favorite characters. The game's gacha system is also quite generous, until recently I guess, but so basically there's a large waifu collection sort of components in the game. People who like Touhou really like Touhou, like the music, characters, and the story, all of it comes together. And I think that's probably the biggest factor which draws people into this game right now. In terms of main story, the game has 4 chapters. It has quite a lot of it, a lot of text to get through. It features the embodiment of Scarlet Devil cast a lot, of course, like any Touhou spin-off game. There's also a Hifu side story, which features Renko and Malibali from Zun's music CDs. Those main storylines are always available, and then there are also event stories, which last about 2 to 3 weeks. There's always an event going on, and these are kind of like mini little self-contained side stories. The stories themselves are quite decent. I'm just kind of sick of the visual novel format. They keep on reusing the same music, sound effects, and those little shooting and explosion animations, and I'm quite tired of it. If it was a book, I would probably read it a lot faster. I just want to read the next text. I don't want to see the same animations. Okay, so what about the gacha system? In Touhou LostWord, you get quite a lot of rolls, but the rates of drawing in that character is kinda low at 0.5% for the featured character of the banner. The idea is that you're meant to spark units or pity units. For normal festival friends, there will be 150 pulls, and it's quite manageable to do that, to get that every month. So just from logging in and playing the game for 5 minutes a day, you'll get about 100 pulls a month. If you grind hard and do your errands, you can get up to 250 pulls a month, even as a free-to-play. And when you're first starting out, when you clear the story for the first time, you also get cubes, which are used for pulling. So that's some more pulls that you can get at the start when you first clear story stages. Basically, the average player would be able to spark or pity a festival unit for 150 pulls a month without paying a cent. But there are also higher rarities which are variants of various Touhou characters, and these cost more pulls to spark and have their own special paper dolls which are premium currency you need to limit break them. The good news is that these special characters are not really necessary for a majority of the game, except for the game's hardest content. So I would say that the game is still quite generous to free-to-play players, but there's also the issue of power creep. As for myself, the reason I play, and if you've watched some of my previous videos you might already know, is for the gameplay itself, the battle mechanics. This game has quite complex mechanics, but unfortunately the devs are not doing a great job designing new stages. I think they just don't really care because the players don't really care about this. I think this is the biggest reason why LostWord is dying, because the gameplay sucks. Ultimately, when you're done with the story, when the excitement of pulling characters is over, all that's left is the gameplay, and the endgame sucks. It's very grindy, there's a lot of issues with it, so players are leaving. Before I go more into the game's issues, there's one more reason why people play, and that's just collecting lots of stuff, watching numbers grow. It's why games like Cookie Clicker are popular. If just figuring out the most efficient way to collect lots of stuff. And it creates sort of a sunk cost where if I quit, then all the stuff will be gone, so you don't really want to quit. But eventually, if the gameplay sucks, you reach a point where you just where you can just overcome this sunk cost and eventually players will just quit. And now we come to the biggest issue with the game, which is the player experience. There's basically no tutorial for the quite complex battle mode mechanics. In the first place, gacha game players aren't used to having to think a lot about the game. They're more used to autoing stuff. Some of them don't even understand gacha itself or probability, right? And that's perfectly fine, right? Not everyone wants to think very hard when they're playing a video game. But if you are that kind of person, then you're missing a big part of Touhou LostWord. You'll not enjoy that part, and you end up complaining that the stages are all very difficult or impossible, or more pay to win than they actually are. Even if you are trying to learn more of the complex battle mechanics, it can be quite daunting because there's a steep learning curve. There's a lot you need to know before it starts to make sense. The Game Press wiki is also difficult to navigate through, especially as a newer player. It can be difficult to find a specific piece of information, and it's hard to tell when content is outdated. But I'm gonna stop there because that can be a whole nother video. To put things into perspective, this theme I made for a previous endgame stage, which is one of the cheapest in terms of character and stamina costs, took me about 6 hours to plan out the turn-by-turn steps, and it took me almost 10 minutes to execute that plan. So the depth of strategy in this game is no joke. But what about the overall new player experience? I would argue that the game is quite generous, but only if you know what you're doing. It's not just the combat mechanics, it's knowing what materials you need, where to get them, when to use them, and also stuff like errands, which is where you get about half the free-to-play seal crystals, which are used for pulling characters. The game doesn't even tell you how to spawn them, and it's needlessly complicated. My errand guide video is 5 minutes long, which is insane for something which should just be log in, send your friends on an errand, and then come back 2 hours later, claim your rewards, and then rinse and repeat. Again, the Game Press wiki isn't very helpful. They do have a new player guide, but it's more of an information dump and doesn't focus on what's important. Even if you read through the whole thing, you won't really know what you're supposed to do in order to make fast progress. There are also some noob traps like awakenings, which increase your character's power in exchange for increasing the stamina cost. In most cases, this makes your character useless for efficient farming, and this small bonus from awakening will not make up for a lack of game knowledge. There are also predatory banners which try to get newer players to spend money. You can do a 10 pull with 600 god crystals, and it says guaranteed one friend, but it's a random friend, not the friend featured on the banner, and if you didn't click on the details to check, this might not be so apparent. Also, 600 god crystals for a 10 pull is not very worth, and you're better off spending it somewhere else. There's also some misleading banner art featuring certain strong characters, which may lead players to believe that those characters are featured and they have a drop rate up. Well, in fact, there's no such thing, and the only way to check is again by clicking on the details page, which for some reason takes forever to load up. They also have been giving out these 100 free pulls but with hidden drop rates, and it does feel like the character drop rates from these pulls are especially low. Well, free stuff is free stuff, you can't really complain, but after all the excitement, you can't help but feel a little bit cheated. And that quite nicely summarizes the new player experience. If you have played for a bit and then decided to join Discord and talk to some more experienced players, you might find that you have wasted your time, money and effort and could have progressed a lot faster if you had known what you are doing. Next is the issue of the game needing a lot of grinding to progress. In this game, grinding means leaving your phone or device open in order to auto-farm a stage, and that can be kind of annoying. Not everyone is able to do that. In the early game, you need to grind for experience and materials, in the mid game for some farmable story cards, and the end game is more grinding. It gets kind of ridiculous. I was farming one of their limited endgame EX stages for the entire duration of 2 weeks, 18 hours a day, and I ended up with 9 of these story cards. You need 5 of them to combine into a max copy, so I'm left with 4 useless copies. When you farm a stage, you have to watch through all the animations, and this can take forever if you're using a longer comp like the one I was using, because I didn't have the pay-to-win character that the stage was designed for. The drop rates for the featured limited story card is 0.3% estimated, or about 1 in 300 based on community data. So it's really frustrating to keep on doing the stage and not know if you're gonna get the drop. To fix the issue of having your device on all the time, they could increase the animation speed or make it so that you can spend 10 times the stamina/spirit points in order to get 10 times the reward in one go, for example. And with the issue of the RNG of the card drops, maybe they could have some sort of exchange shop where after completing the stage a certain number of times, then you could exchange for a card. The UI is also kinda clunky. After playing for a long time, you do start to notice it just takes forever to navigate to a stage or to upgrade a card or character, and it would be great if they improve that. They have done some quality of life improvements, but it leaves much to be desired. Errands are also a pain to do. You keep on having to log in to do them. You can't really skip them because they give so much seal crystals for pulling, and spawning them is inconsistent and buggy. The game also has had a lot of bugs. Somehow I have a whole playlist of bug videos. But yeah, I guess they don't have a large development team. So, is Touhou LostWord still worth playing? If you're still watching this video, you're in the probably 30% of audience retention at this point, so thank you for the support. Before we answer the question, I have started another YouTube channel where I talk about medical cases. So if you are interested, please go check that out, either over here or in the description. Touhou LostWord's main draw is Touhou. If you like Touhou, it can be a good way to learn more about Touhou characters and to experience some spin-off stories. But if not, then there isn't that much the game has to offer. There are many other gacha games and strategy games, so considering Touhou LostWord's flaws, you might not want to pick it up just for those two aspects. Thank you for watching and see you next time.